Good morning, and this is a first for Dr. Sam's blog. This morning we're going to have a webinar. It's our first time through having a webinar, so we'll see how all that works. And it will be available both through the blog and the YouTube. And one important feature of it, it's free. Now, look who we have with us today. A couple of major figures in the literacy world. David Harrison is poet laureate from the state of Missouri and has done some wonderful work in terms of developing materials that can be used at all grade levels. I'm going to say that all grade levels. And Timothy Rasinski is professor emeritus at hello, hit Tim, at the Kent State University. And I've got to throw this in. Stanford University in 21 and 23 called him one of the top 2% of the world's scientists. So if you're looking for research base, you got it. Okay, so that all said, gentlemen, it's time for me to be quiet and turn things over to Tim. And I'm just very excited to do this. So Tim, take it away, please.
Okay. Thank you, Sam. And again, let me share my kudos with you with your blog. It's really been a wonderful resource for teachers, not only in the U.S., but around the world. Uh, how does a guy like me, Tim Rosinski, researcher, get connected with David Harrison, poet? Well, we share something in common, and that's a love for poetry. I love poetry because I ran a reading clinic at my university for over 30 years. And what we found was that when you're working with struggling readers, poetry is the way to go. It is the avenue to success for so many readers. And I'd like to just kind of give you an overview on my take, why I think poetry is so important for our younger and struggling readers. Uh, and also keep in mind that it's often pushed off to the side because we have to work on stories and informational text. So here's my take on poetry. Number one, it's fun. We know that poems and song lyrics, they're just fun to recite. Children love poetry. My 2 and 3 year old grandkids just love coming over and sharing their new poem with me. But there's more to it as well. Uh, Poems are for children are usually short. They're filled with rhythm and rhyme. And you know what that makes them easy to learn. And when you're talking about younger and struggling readers, we want them to feel successful. How many of us, even as adults, we hear a song lyric or a poem once or twice, and all of a sudden we can recite it ourselves. So, for our younger kids, it's just a natural here. Because poems rhyme, by the way, they're also filled with rhyming words. And rhyming words, for those of you in the literacy area, know that we call those rhymes, RIMES, or word families. So in the phonics dimension, if you're working with word families, look for poetry that rhymes. For example, if you're working with diddle diddle dumpling, my son John slept, do I can't remember, slept all day. Oh gosh, I forgot the whole thing. Diddle diddle dumpling, my son Fred slept all day on his bed. Woke up at midnight, screamed, "There's a monster under my bed." Diddle diddle dumpling, my son Fred. That was actually written by one of our students in our reading clinic. But did you notice all the ed words in it? It's a perfect text for developing that. Poetry is full with wonderful language, as I'm sure David will tell you, being a poet himself. And the last thing I'll mention is this poetry. Again, the rhythmical nature of poetry lends itself to prosody. And my area of study has been reading fluency, and prosody is one of those areas that's often forgotten, often missed in lieu of automaticity. So that's a natural text for developing. And if I might add one more, I could go on the whole 30 minutes here, but I'll stop after this. Poetry is meant to be performed, right? I've found very few poems that are meant to be read silently. Well, if a text is meant to be performed, it needs to be rehearsed. And we all know that another name for rehearsal is repeated reading. And we all know that repeated reading is a science-based approach to developing fluency. So there's just so many reasons to bring poetry into the classroom. And it was just, I was so blessed many years ago to be introduced to David. And we've been working as partners ever since. So, David, I'm going to give it over to you now and mute myself. So there you go.
Tim, thank you. I can listen to you all day too, and I wish you could just go on. Yes, it was so such a lucky day for me as well that we were introduced by the director at Scholastic at that time, who she told me Rasinski likes poetry and he's a great expert in this whole field. And I think you two would get along fine. And so she introduced us that way, and off we went. So, yes, I'm a poet and currently just finishing my term as Missouri State Poet Laureate. I'm having a party at the end of this month, which is the last day of my term. And I'm having, among other entertainers, kids, elementary kids from two schools, and they will be performing some of my poems. And I always look forward to that. It's not only a crowd drawer, but a crowd pleaser. And the kids just do get with it. And they, again, that practice, that rehearsal, the repeated reading works to their advantage, whether they realize it or not. And we all love it, and they do too. And it's just another aspect of poetry that it lends itself so beautifully to performing and building confidence as well as fluency, and a bit of a ham can be thrown in there for a good taste. Well, so this book I would like to talk about, this 40 poems for 40 weeks, is one, it's an anthology, and Tim and I did it together, I'm proud to say. This was inspired by a librarian, Dr. Angela Knight, and she's the librarian at a school that's named after me, I'm very happy to say. And she was telling me one day that she reads a poem every week to her entire student body. And I thought, what's what an incredible idea, because not all teachers treat poetry the same. Some love it, endorse it, and encourage it with their kids and so on. Others find it's best just to leave it alone until that one teaching unit every year, and they go ahead and do what they can to teach poetry. And what people like Tim and me and I and other people are struggling to do all the time is to encourage more and more teachers to endorse and encourage poetry. So here's this librarian, and she's doing just exactly that, a poem a week. So I went to Tim and said, this is just such a natural. What we need is to collect a bunch of poets rather, and put out an anthology that librarians, certainly others too, teachers, families, mom and dad at home, big brother, big sister, but whoever is reading to young people will have a resource. And so we talked about that and thought, well, we need 40 poems to get through the school year, and 40 different poems by 40 different poets. So in my business, I know quite a few poets. So I went out and started a list. And I'm not going to take a lot of time here bragging, but I think it's important that people understand the quality of the poems, of the poets rather, in this anthology. Karen Crago is a past poet laureate of the state of Missouri. Ted Kooser is a past United States poet laureate. Georgia Hurd is well known and beloved all over the United States and beyond. Joe Bruchac, Joyce Sidman, Nikki Grimes, Jane Yolen. The list goes on, and there are 40 of us. I have one poem, and everybody else has one poem. So we decided that for kids to really understand something about poems, they need to know something about the people who write them. So rather than just say, okay, here's the poem, why not put in a little autobiography, but more like an introduction. If you're standing in front of a group of kids in school and you're a stranger to them and you want to introduce yourself, how would you do that? What would you say? So we encouraged all of these poets to do just exactly that. And some of these things are really funny, but they're all very down to earth, very easy to read, and it helps make these people come alive and be something rather than just words on a piece of paper. So we have a picture of the poet so that the kids say, oh, that's what she looks like. I didn't know that. Or I kind of like him. He's got a nice smile and whatever. And then the introduction, then the poem on page 3. And then, if that weren't enough, the famous Tim Rasinski did a famous word ladder for each and every poem in the book. So you have 40 Tim Rasinski word ladders. People would buy the book just for 40 Tim Rasinski word ladders, and they're wonderful. So we were giving that extra value as well. And if that weren't enough, stand by. I sound like I'm standing on the back of a wagon selling something. I just want you to know that we also ask these poets to recommend books of poems that they like. And so these 40 poets, who among them have published over 1,000 books, recommended another 120 books of poetry. So you have this bibliography in the back of your reading list, which is another wonderful resource. So there you have it. And we worked on it with all these wonderful contributors, and the book is now out and finding its way from library to library, word of mouth, and hopefully today we'll spread that word a little bit more too. So, Tim, what would you like to add to our efforts on this book?
Oh, I just absolutely love it. What I like is making those poems personal. The children can hear the poem, and as you said, they can read the biography. But then, with your most recent project, one of your most recent projects, you're always working on something, is that video library. And I think our audience would love to hear about that because it's another way of making each poem more personal for the children. So I'll let
Okay.
you elaborate on that.
All right. Well, as a poet laureate of a state, we are asked to have a project to help spread, the gospel of poetry around the state. So in my case, I started a weekly poetry column in the Springfield, Missouri News Leader, thanks to the editor-in-chief, Amos Bridges, who endorsed the idea and let me do it. So once again, I began to go out into the field and ask people I know, had the pleasure and the privilege of reading with in various conferences and meeting and knowing a little bit. And so over a period of time, I gathered a list of 60, and they include a dozen poets laureate from states. One is a former U.S. poet laureate. One is a former children's poet laureate, Ken Nesbitt, and 10 other poets laureate from Alaska, and Nebraska, and Arkansas, and Kansas, and Wyoming, and Missouri. And so we have great talent contributing 500-word essays to this column. We have professors and teachers. We have Tim Rasinski. We have Mary Jo Fresh, Sylvia Vardell, Laura Robb, and many others who are just knowledgeable people. And we have favorite poets, Jane Yolen, Charles Ginya, again, Georgia Hurd. So they began to line up and give me these columns. And I started in 2023. I'm about to conclude again. My term is expiring, so I'm going to close the column at the end of this month with 101 consecutive weekly newspaper columns. Then went back and began to raise money to record these columns because I was afraid that we're going to lose them. Not everyone keeps their newspaper forever, but you can look them up on the video on YouTube if you want to do that. So we now have recorded the first 52 of those wonderful columns, and that's what we can talk about today because this is a resource for all kinds of people for all kinds of reasons. Everyone comes at it a little bit differently. Some come at it as a practicing poet who tell us why poetry is important to them and how they come up with their ideas and how they go about writing poetry. Others say, well, I don't write poetry as much as I use poetry, and this is why and how it works. And others, I have editors, I have journalists, I have a young poet. So this is a unique, as far as I can know, a very unique resource, and it's already the first 52 are already on YouTube. You can look for poetry from daily life, free video library. And I think last time I looked was like 2 minutes ago because I look at it constantly. There's over 1,700 views already, and we just put it up 4 months ago. So it's off and running, and I hope that people will enjoy it and tell others about it.
That's great, David. I love that idea, using it in the classroom where a teacher might, share a poem and then provide the background to the poet and have the YouTube video of that poet actually speaking to the children.
Right.
What a great way of introducing children to not only poetry but to poets themselves, and perhaps give them the impetus to become poets themselves as well.
Well,
So.
yeah. And
Well, I'm going to take it a step further now and talk about, just not just the love of poetry, but what we can do with it in the classroom. David shared with you a book that he and I put together, 40 Poems for 40 Weeks. And here's another one that we wrote along with Dr. Lynn Coolidge. It's called The Fluency Development Lesson. And I'd like to just spend a few minutes talking about this with you because, number one, it uses poetry. And number two, it's an intervention for children who are having trouble. I developed this several years ago. In fact, it was cited by the National Reading Panel as a worthwhile approach to develop fluency. Basically, the plan is this: for children to learn to read something well every single day. And if you're a struggling reader, that could be quite a challenge there. But what can you learn to read well in a single day, or 2 days, or 3 days? And of course, poetry fits right in there. So the lesson is a quite simple one. It's a combination of tools that we know work for developing fluency. First, introducing a poem to the children. Teacher reads it aloud once or twice. Children follow along. Then they read it chorally once or twice more. They practice with a partner. And then after giving a bit of this practice, listening to and reading it several times through, they are given the opportunity to perform for their classmates, for parents, for the school principal, and so on. Really give them a chance to show off what they have learned. And then we end it with some word study, because we know words are important. Fluency and phonics go together, and it combines these. Now, as I mentioned, we've used this in a reading clinic here at Kent State as what we call the core lesson for over 30 years. And the results we got were really quite remarkable. In fact, we were identified by the state of Ohio as one of the best examples of literacy development several years ago. But it never, really took off until David and I and our colleague Lynn Coolidge said, "Hey, let's get together and share this with teachers around the country." So what we did was we planned the lesson. It's about a 20-minute daily lesson, and David wrote the poetry, ranging across the grade levels, and Lynn and I put together the actual lesson plan itself. Now, does it work? That's always the question. The science of reading. And the answer is yes. On my blog, I have a blog. It's at timrasinski.com. I've had several teachers over the past year who decided to try this out, and they've shared their results. For example, one teacher by the name of Laura Stam found with her second graders that in 3 months' time, the average gain was 46 words correct per minute. Well, for second graders, the average growth for a whole year is 50 words correct per minute. So her children were making in 3 months' time what kids normally make in a whole year. And this, is with kids who struggle to begin with. Another teacher by the name of Bo Grace, a principal actually at Anna Grace Bo Ryan, I'm sorry, I'm getting all confused here. Again, tried it with her sixth graders, and again, just wrote to me today to tell me kids coming back from school from last year, the gains they have kept over the summer. We know that kids lose ground over the summer. And she talked about the confidence this opportunity to practice and perform a poem gives kids. And finally, Julia Armstrong wrote about this. And again, all these are available on my website, my blog. Julia is a fifth grade teacher, interventionist in Maryland, and she tried this with her students over the course of 3 or 4 months last year. And the five students that were in her intervention group all were released from intervention after doing this lesson on a regular basis. And keep in mind, to be released, it's not just a matter of reading faster, but reading with better comprehension. And, I failed to mention this at the beginning. Poetry is filled with content that easily can lead to great discussions and comprehension development. So, whether you're using poetry just for the love of poetry, which I highly endorse, or if you want to kind of fit it into a lesson plan, uh, we give you complete permission. We, along with Sam, are lovers of poetry. So, David, okay, if I leave you with the last word?
Yes, and thank you for the fluency development lesson, for being the genius behind it in the first place, and for guiding us through with to this wonderful book. I would like to say too that when a poet tackles something like this and writes poetry for a specific reason, uh, it's not, you don't work independently, you work with your partners. So in this case, I had two of the best out there, and I would write a poem, and every now and then one of them or both of them would say, no, I don't think so. I think we need to move it over this way, or let's try it again that way. And so I had an in-house uh, expert committee to help guide me. And so it is truly a collaboration. And I think better, far better for that. So thank you again, Tim. Uh, at the moment, my next project is with another old friend and colleague, Mary Jo Fresh. And she and I have written a number of books too. She's a emeritus professor out of the Ohio State University. And she and I are working together now on some decoding poems. Again, I'm in this particular book, I'm going to have 100 poems, Tim.
I don't know how
So
you do it.
yeah, if you drive by my house late at night, you'll see some lights on in my office. But there'll be the phonic patterns the students have learned, and we'll be reinforcing those and encouraging them to read them and perform them, and so more of tackling it from a slightly different angle, but we're all working the same way all the time, trying to help these kids become better readers and understanders of the language and lovers of the language and long-term readers.
David, while I have you, mentioned Mary Jo Fresh, she a good friend and colleague also, and I'm going to make another plug. You, her, and myself a couple of years ago wrote two books called
Yeah.
Partner Poems and Word Ladders, and it was such a treat to develop the well, in your case, these partner poems meant to be performed by two students, but also the follow-up activities, whether it was word ladders or Mary Jo came up with such great word study activities.
Mhm.
It's such a neat and inexpensive book. If anybody's out there interested, take a look on Amazon, Partner Poems and Word Ladders. Look at the reviews and ratings because I've never had a book that's been rated so high, or two books actually. There's my shameless plug for us working together one more time. So I'm going to shut up. Sam, do you want to follow up here, or David, do you have anything else?
Yes, I think we're coming close to coming to a close. I first of all want to thank the both of you for making this is our pilot blog, excuse me, the pilot of doing this kind of webinar. So thank you both. And I do want to say one last thing, and that is your fluency development lessons. Um, could you briefly tell us this, what grades are the lessons developed for? And I mean,
Oh, yeah, the poetry in the actual book itself, I think we are aiming for all the elementary grades, from beginning readers up to all the way up to fifth, sixth grade.
Yeah.
Even if you are working with fifth graders, you might want to use the fourth grade poetry or the third grade, and gradually move the students up through more and more challenging text. So it's a pretty much complete program.
so I just wanted to make it clear that it's for all teachers. Uh, and the other wonderful thing about it is that uh, uh, these are custom written and designed to develop all those kinds of background knowledge kinds of things that
Yes.
you want to do. So I just wanted to put that last little plug in. So unless either of you have anything more to say, I think we're ready to wrap things up. So that is the first webinar, and thank you both. And this will be posted on my YouTube channel and will also be available through the blog. And boy, thank you both for everything you're doing for teachers.
Thank you, Sam.
Thank you, Sam. Thanks,
Okay.
everybody.